Hey everybody, it's Claire Barton, and on today's blogcast, I want to talk to you about the 5 ways that you could be using Asana in your business. So, if you've ever heard me talk about anything to do with business, you've probably already heard me mentioning Asana. It's definitely the hub of my business and it helps me in lots and lots of different ways. So, I just want to show you a couple of those ways and explain a few different features and ways that you can use Asana to make your life and your business a little bit easier. Now, if you haven't heard me talk about Asana and you haven't heard of this software, I'm not talking about the Asana that you learn in your yoga class. This is a free app or a free tool that's available. There is a paid version, but I only use the free one, so that's all I'm talking about today. That's available as an app for your desktop or your tablet or your iPhone or your smartphone. So you can use it pretty much across all of the platforms that you might be using to manage your business already anyway. So the first way is to use it as a to-do list. So that's pretty obvious. It's a very list-focused app. And one of everyone's favorite lists, and what's something you're probably already doing in one way, shape, or form, is using a to-do list anyway. Now, if you're like me and you do love to-do lists and sometimes end up with lots of to-do lists in lots of different places, you might have a to-do list in the good old pen and paper. And don't get me wrong, I also love using pen and paper for to-do lists as well. And I constantly go back and use those every now and then. I really like the tactileness of pen and paper. However, what I don't like is having to-do lists in lots of different notebooks and a couple of different apps. I use my iNotes on my phone and on my desktop. I also use things like Evernote, and I have a reminders app that I use. As well as lots of different paper bits and pieces, or in the past I've definitely used millions of pieces of post-it notes. So if this is you and you're ready to tame your to-do list system, Asana might be for you. So there's lots of beautiful things about Asana when you start using it, but using it as a list is definitely a really great place to start. It's really easy, it's very low risk. You kind of can't break Asana. It's almost too much of a blank canvas sometimes to get started, but using it as a to-do list until you're comfortable with some of the functionalities is a really great place to start. Now, there's 3 types of to-do lists that I would recommend you start using either now or when you're a bit more comfortable with the tool. And the first one is to have it as a generic to-do list. So these are things that need to be done in your business at some point in the short to medium term. The next couple of weeks, if not maybe a month or something like that. We don't want to have too many things on a to-do list, and there's a few different reasons for that. Largely, it just gets a little bit overwhelming when you come into your to-do list and there's 100 things on there. Often we end up doing things like procrastinating. If you're like me, you're a procrastinator. You could be a procrastinator, a procrastinator, a procrastinator phone caller. Whatever it is that you do to procrastinate, that's what we start when we start doing it, when we start feeling overwhelmed. So we don't want too many things on there. It's overwhelming. Mindset-wise, it's just not great. So I'll come back to that in a second. The second to-do list that you can have, and you set this up as a separate project right next to your main to-do list, is your priorities or your top actions or your daily to-do list or whatever you want to call it, whatever makes sense. And you can actually drag and drop tasks and subtasks and information between lists when you're in Asana, so it makes it super easy. So I recommend on this one you have no more than 3 to 5 items at any time, and this is how you can prioritize. So when you come in, or if you're planning the next day at the end of the current day, you can actually drag and drop things into your to-do list, into your high priority or into your urgent list, so that you know when you come in the next day and you're having a look at your priority to-do list, you've only got a few things in there. You don't have to work through all those hundreds of things in your main list to try and work out what you need to do or what your priorities are, what the urgent things are, and where your focus needs to lie, because it's all in one place and it's nice and easy to see. So you can also get a really beautiful feeling of and a sense of achievement once you've actually gone through and finished everything on your to-do list, which, let's be honest, never happens when you've got a list as long as your arm. So that's the second one. So the first one is your main to-do list. The second one is your priority to-do list, whatever you want to call that. The third one is what we might call a toy box or the shiny object cage. And this is where projects or ideas or longer term, bigger tasks can go, again, so that you're not clogging up that main to-do list and you're still capturing the information somewhere, but it doesn't start to feel super overwhelming and super crazy. So if there's something that you want to get done at some point, but it's not super urgent, or it's probably not going to get done in the short to medium term, it might be starting a new service or product. It might be updating your website or changing your website. It might be learning a new skill. It might be going through a course or something like that. So anything that's kind of has to be done at some point, or you want to be doing it at some point, but it's not really in the foreseeable future, so that you don't lose that information. We want to store it somewhere so that you can clear it off your mind. If you don't write it down somewhere, often it just sort of sits there and, keeps begging to be acknowledged or done or something like that. So having a place that you can keep coming back to is really great. I'm not going to go into too much more detail about this, but there's some other beautiful ways that you can use to-do lists as well. One of the beauties of using something like Asana is that you can also use it for you can also delegate and set due dates and that sort of thing as well, which makes it easy to sort things out and also to use it kind of like a bring up system. So if you put something into your shiny object list and you don't want to forget it, you can set yourself a reminder to have Asana remind you about it in a couple of weeks or a couple of months' time as well, so it doesn't completely fall off the end of the world and never be seen again. So to-do list, that's the first way that you can use Asana. The second way is to use it to delegate. So if you are starting to think about, or you already have started to build a team, and this can be just you plus your a VA, whether your VA does 2 hours a week or 2 hours a month or 20 hours a week, you can start to delegate. You might eventually start having a few people on your team, or a few people who are kind of on the periphery who help you out from time to time. They could be graphic designers, they could be web people, bookkeepers, all of that sort of thing. So anyone who needs to kind of be kept in the loop, or anyone who needs to keep you in the loop about things, or be able to follow your processes and systems, or just to be able to ask them to do something from time to time, using Asana to delegate is really, really fantastic. So as I mentioned before, in any of the to-do lists, any of the lists or any of the boards that you might set up, you can delegate the task or subtask to a person, as long as you've invited them into your organization on Asana. Then there's also some beautiful mechanisms for them to comment, ask questions. You can tag each other. You can use things like tags to say, to let each other know at what phase each task is up to. So you might set up a little system where you've got some different color tags for in progress, or to be reviewed, or closed and finished, and that sort of thing. So you can get as techie or non-techie as you want to with these things. But having a single space to delegate means that nothing ever falls through the cracks. You can change your view in Asana to see what is still left to do and what has already been done, or a combination of the two. So you can also use it as a bit of a tracking system, so that you can see where your team's up to in certain projects, or with certain one-off tasks as well. So it's a really cool way to cut out all of those messages and emails that you sometimes end up having to send, saying, hey, can you do this? And then, oh, can you also do this? And don't forget to do this. You can just keep it all in one area, which makes it a lot easier to manage and is much more friendly on your mental state as well as your time. So that's all delegation. The third thing that you can be using Asana for is project management and planning. Now, this is really, I think, where Asana comes into its own. For a free tool to be able to help you with project planning and project management, and incorporate everything from having different sections or different parts of that project, delegating it to different people with different functions, and also setting deadlines or expected due dates and that sort of thing, makes it so easy to run a beautiful project. So whether or not you are running a project that's internal or it's external, it could be a workshop that you're running or a course that you're running. It could be an internal project such as relaunching a website, or it could be setting up a new service or something like that. It's all managed from the same spot, so that at any time, anyone who's working on the project, even if it's just yourself, you can see what you've planned, what the due dates are. You can swing your legs out of bed in the morning, come and have a check-in with Asana, and it will help you work out what you need to do, which is really fantastic on the days when you're on fire and you're just ready to power through some things. It's also really fantastic for the days that you don't feel like getting out of bed. You can't think, and you don't need to worry about having to work out where you're up to and all of that sort of thing. So having it as a project plan is really fantastic. The other benefit of using Asana for things like project management and project planning is that you can set up a template. Now, this works really nicely into the next point, which is workflows. So anything that you do in your business more than once can be set up with a workflow, and that includes setting up projects or anything that you do to do with projects. So similarly, if you set up a project, say if you're running a workshop for the first time, or you are just changing your template on your website, or you're moving things around or something like that, you can actually create that as a template so that next time, whether it's next month or next year or next millennium, you can redo it without having to worry about how did I do that thing before, where's all the passwords, what are all the links, what process did I do last time. You can actually just go back to the one that you've done the first time and keep duplicating it. Obviously, it's a dynamic platform. You can keep changing it, nothing's set in concrete, but you can actually create these beautiful templates, which turns into the workflows. So workflows is the fourth thing that you can use Asana to do, and I absolutely love workflows. You've probably heard me say that as well. A workflow is a fancy or maybe less fancy word of talking about things like a standard operating procedure. So it's how we do things around here. How do we do, you might have workflows for things such as publishing a blog or running a workshop or running a meetup. You might have it for onboarding clients. So what are the processes? What are all the things? What's that fancy checklist that you want to make sure happens every single time you do a certain function in your business? Now, I won't go into too much of this. Sometimes I talk about workflows in a whole 1-hour webinar, so I won't go into too much, but there's definitely a lot to be said about them. But the main benefits for having a workflow, as I said, is that it makes it easier for you and quicker for you, because when you first do something, you first have to work out what it is that you need to do, then you need to work out how to do it, then you need to do it. When you have a workflow and you're just following that process and you're basically ticking and flicking to make sure that you're not missing anything, all you have to do is do it. You cut out the first two things because you've got everything laid out there for you. So it makes it a lot faster and easier. The second thing is it makes it more consistent. If you do it yourself, or if you have someone else doing it for you, or if you have someone else doing it for you and then they stop working for you for some reason and you have to get someone else, it makes that whole process remain consistent. You don't have to keep going back to try and work out how you did a thing or how the last person was doing something for you, because it's all laid out there. So it just means the continuity remains. Most importantly, the thing about having a workflow is that for your tribe and your audience, people who are coming along to these things, reading your blog, coming to your workshops, coming to your courses, retreats, whatever, they are getting a consistent experience from you. And what's consistency equal? Trust. Okay, so if people know that they're always going to get roughly the same sort of frequency of their blogs, and it's always going to be able to be found in these certain locations, and you've got a certain type of branding or image style that you use, so that people can easily recognize it and build that consistency, the know, like, and trust factor, everyone's a winner. So I won't go on too much more. You can hear I get a little bit ranty about workflows, but definitely Asana is a really fantastic tool to be able to create a workflow that's a dynamic document, so you can keep changing it and improving it, take things out if they're not working, add things in, change links, all of that sort of thing. But basically, it's a nice little hub of where you can store your processes for your business. All right, the fifth one. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, so have a bit of a listen, but if it's a little bit too advanced, don't take too much notice of it. The last way that you can use it is as a database. Now, I'm not a fan of having databases for the sake of having databases, and often we have database-like information such as name, email address, maybe date of birth, phone numbers, that sort of thing, in our email server. So if you're sending newsletters and you have an email platform like ActiveCampaign or MailChimp, GetResponse, all of those sort of things, you probably already have some sort of a database. If that's sufficient for you, keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to implement new things just for the sake of it. However, if you want to start having a bit more of a sophisticated database for client relationship management, which is CRM or customer relationship management, you can use things like Asana. And there's some really fancy back-end things you can do where, if someone signs up through your online booking form, then they can go into Asana and then you can manage them there, or you can put your client notes in there. You can put how many sessions they've paid for, how many sessions they've already taken, any links, all of the pertinent information for each of your clients there. You could also use it to manage a database of clients about where they're at in your sales funnel, or where they're at in the process with you, the pipeline, whatever you want to call it. Whether they are a warm lead or they're a current client or an ex-client, whether they, I don't know, have chatted with you on a discovery call but not gone further. So you can use it to take as much information, to gather as much information or as little as you want. My caveat, my little asterisk on this one is that whatever information you gather and store anywhere, and this goes for anything in your business, it has to inform a decision. There's no point in gathering information for information's sake. That's boring, it takes up space and it takes up time, and there's absolutely no point. It has to inform a decision and it has to trigger an action. So if you're gathering information that's not going to do one of those two things, stop gathering the information. It's just wasting everyone's time. So that's one way, to use it as a database for CRM. The other database that some people use it for is also to use it as a database for content. So if it's important to you to know where you've got content, what it's called, what it's about, when it's been published, and to remind yourself to do something with it in 6 months or 12 months time, or all of that sort of thing, rather than having to go around and find where you've put blogs on this website and what you've put on your Facebook page, what you've sent to third parties, what you've written but not distributed yet, all of that sort of thing. Using Asana as a database for that sort of information can be really helpful as well. So, as I said, using Asana as a database is much more advanced, usually for most people. If it makes sense to you, go nuts, but don't worry too much about it. So, just to recap, the 5 best ways, or the 5 top ways of using Asana in your business to make your life a little bit easier are: number 1, to-do lists. And if you can break those to-do lists down into your main to-do list, your priority to-do list, and your toy box to-do list, then that's extra points for you. The second way is to use it for delegating to your team or to the people who are helping you out in your business. The third way is for project planning and project management, which feeds into the fourth way, which is to use it for workflow. So anything that happens more than once in your business. And the fifth way, as we've just chatted about, is to use it as a database. And the most classic database examples would be for a CRM, client relationship management, or for your content database. So I hope this has been super helpful. As you can hear, I do love using Asana. It's definitely the hub of how I run a super organized and efficient business for myself, and how I help other people do the same thing as well. As always, if you've got any questions, please send me an email or reply to this wherever you're reading it, whether it's on social media or on my website. I love to hear your questions, comments, queries, suggestions, or anything else. So show me how you're using Asana and let me know if this has been helpful. I look forward to talking to you soon. Bye.